To be Westlanders, my name is Mo Fisher. Welcome to the Lost Holotapes channel, where we delve into the detailed historical lore of the Fallout world. In the previous episode, we concluded our exploration of Fallout New Vegas, and today we will open the portal to its second dimension, fan-made story mods. Some time ago, I set a goal to explore them, giving members of the fan community a chance to impress me with their creativity, and I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of the lore and the overall level of development of individual modes. For this purpose, I scoured the entire Nexus and ModDB and prepared for you a list of all storyline modes that are worth your game and time, and which can be considered candidates for the Lost Holotapes. This list is presented in a separate tab in my lore compendium, the link to which is in the description. If you want to play mods, pay attention first to those highlighted in green. Also, I highly recommend checking the list of mods in the description, for which I am most likely to make videos, and playing them beforehand, to be in the context of what's happening. After all, my video format is not just retelling the plot, and mentioning individual characters, factions, and settlements may not say anything without your own prior acquaintance. Also, don't forget to support the video with likes, subscriptions, and comments, and as always, I recommend watching this series in chronological order. I've noticed that if there is increased interest from subscribers in the early hours after the release of a video, it ends up in recommendations, so let's abuse this mechanic. Of course, we have already explored the lore of fan mods before this episode, but the fundamental difference was that events there take place in isolated wastelands. Usually there are not many problems in evaluating them since the stories are written from scratch and they are isolated. But when we talk about mods whose events take place in an existing and lore-rich wasteland, such as the Mojave, working with mods becomes very delicate. We often face difficulties in evaluating even canonical lore, and I had to build walls of explanations of why I consider certain decisions inappropriate in the general narrative, and what constitutes as a banal mistake or a scriptwriter's oversight. In the course of my archival work, I adhere to a certain system of rules, which I sometimes articulate, but I think now is the right moment to voice all these rules together. The first rule: if necessary, I polish the lore, as even in the top mods it doesn't always align with the canon, let alone the lore of other mods. The second rule: there may be situations where I don't consider certain pieces of mod lore at all. For example, some specific side quests, as I consider them insufficiently or poorly developed from a narrative or expositional point of view, or too insignificant to devote a whole unused location or theme to them in the original game. And discarding a huge chunk of top-notch storyline just because one side quest didn't work out is inadequate. The third rule: formally the events of mods take place simultaneously with the events of the original games, which themselves are conditionally happening at a static moment, like the events of Fallout 76 happening day by day on October 23rd of 2102. Therefore, to avoid confusion, contradictions, and temporal loops, I will determine as far as possible the year and dates of mod events, relying on known relative events. The fourth rule: there will inevitably be situations where some mods that we will analyze at early stages will be rewritten in the future by some better mods. With the snap of the fingers, a chunk of lore or even the entire lore of a mod will have to be struck from the narrative. But fortunately, the practice of reissues is established on the channel, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. The fifth rule: whenever possible, I will ignore stock protagonists, such as the Courier, as protagonists of mods. Fallout games are not designed for switching between player characters, and therefore any mod suffers from the necessity of introducing the Courier into the narrative under some pretext, even though he has no relation to the plot. Mods usually have main characters around whom the story is built, but from a technical point of view, they can only be introduced as NPCs, making them main quest givers or companions. The sixth rule: many stories like an epilogue, so we have to decide the fates of factions and settlements ourselves. To free up space for new stories and get rid of the question, how would one faction from one mod react to events happening in another mod, it's best to lead the stories to the restoration of status quo, if possible. In general, we'll figure it out as we go along, but it's apparent that the lore of fan mods will be more flexible than ever, and I will free myself up in this assessment. But of course, I will pay attention to my own authorial adjustments, because I want to be honest with the mod authors and with you, the viewers. So today we will get acquainted with the lore of two mods, working on the Chain Gang and Project Fellowship. The main storyline of the first mod is connected with a group of powder gangers who, instead of robbing caravans, try to rehabilitate themselves, reintegrate into society and start a new life, for which they have to fight with other powder gangers, vipers, jackals, and establish diplomatic relations with factions and settlements. This is a very fresh mod released in 2022. The original New Vegas was so scant on lore for some factions, including those mentioned, that some of the settlements, such as the Horowitz Farmstead and the Prospector's Den, exist only to fill in the blanks of the Mojave map. This mod fixes this misunderstanding. I can highly appreciate the geopolitical aspect of this story, the development of characters, voice acting, gameplay variability, expressing quests, and the dynamics of the story. I'm sure that if this mod had come out around 2013, it would have been among the top mods, but unfortunately, overall interest in New Vegas has long since diminished. Therefore, the mod released by the author Confucius has only slightly more than 400 endorsements, and its conversion rate is less than 5%, which is very strange because some time ago it was almost 9%. Endorsements are the conditional numbers of likes, and conversion rates are the ratio of endorsements to unique downloads on Nexus, the main hub of the Fallout modding community and beyond. I use endorsements and conversion rates as the main metrics for evaluating mods by the fan community. I won't delve into various aspects of mods trying to describe their strengths and weaknesses. After all, we won't see anything fundamentally new in them. But before we move on to the story presented in the mod, I think it's important to remind ourselves of what we actually know from the original Fallout. Powder Gangers are a collective name for groups of various gangs that formed as a result of the riot at the NCR Correctional Facility. In the original New Vegas, the faction was so poorly represented that I'm sure most players still think that Eddie's gang in the prison, Sam Cooke's gang at Vault 19 and the gang of some other guys in Prim are all the same faction, but they're not. These are all different gangs. So we can talk to Eddie or Sam Cooke, but the Powder Gangers in Prim will open fire on us immediately. Eddie leads his group with despotic methods and, in addition to the prison, organizes 4 camps in the vicinity: north, south, west, east. At the same time, the southern camp separates and forms Chavez gang, for which Eddie wipes them out. Eddie's gang manages to raid Sloan and steal dynamite from them, prompting the end of work at the quarry, which is infested with deathclaws, cutting off the main artery connecting Vegas to the southern Mojave. The gang also raids Good Springs, but the town fights back. Another gang, which in the original Vegas is always hostile by default, captures Prim and holds the settlement hostage. The NCR plans to take the prison from Eddie and Prim from the group of renegades. The instigator of the riot, Sam Cooke, finds Vault 19 and settles there. But the group splits. Sam Cooke wants to guerrilla against the NCR, and Philip Lem, his right hand, just wants to survive and settle somewhere. The Whitaker farmstead and Hunter's Farm in the original Vegas are populated by unidentified Powder Gangers, but according to the mod, these are members of Sam Cooke's gang, sitting on these farms on guard duty. The Vipers, being a small fragmented gang that lost the culture of the tribe, settle in Searchlight Gold Mine, Good Springs Farm, Bonnie Springs, and the Ransacked Farm. They are all wiped out by Custors in Bonnie Springs. The scattered gang of cannibals, the Jackals, settles at the Nevada patrol station between Prim and Good Springs, as well as in the camp between Prim and Nipton. In both locations, they are wiped out by the courier during his journey. They also settle in the Prospector's Den, wiping out the original inhabitants. Now, let's talk a bit about the exposition of the mod. Firstly, the mod endows the Vipers and Jackals with cultural features. The Vipers still worship snakes, and the Jackals settle in Walking Box Cavern, where they tame Night Stalkers, which is a very interesting new detail of their character. In real life, the cavern is located at the site of the same named ranch, miles away from anything but desert. I can't imagine who lives there and how. During the prison riot, some Powder Gangers break into several groups, besides Eddie and Sam Cooke. One of the groups, led by Alice Dufresne, forms the Powder Militia in the Westside office. The NCR doesn't have authority in Westside to pursue criminals, and the Kings would have driven the Powder Gangers out of Freeside. Other towns like Prim, Sloan, and Good Springs have already suffered from the convicts and won't allow them to take refuge there. So Westside allows Alice to settle in the city in exchange for their help in maintaining order and actively assisting the town. I believe Alice Dufresne is a reference to Andy Dufresne, the main character of The Shawshank Redemption, a movie close to the theme of the mod. Alice tries to convince other groups of Powder Gangers and Lone Wolves to join their movement, and also negotiates with the NCR to stop pursuing them and give them the opportunity to start a righteous life from scratch. They don't get rid of the name Powder Gangers and clothe it, because for them it's a symbol of redemption. Although I think the authors simply didn't want to texture new attires. Dufresne wants to show that prisoners are also people and deserve a second chance. And it's important to understand that if the NCR takes over the region, they will all be arrested again, but this way they can qualify for amnesty for good deeds they need to do before that. In particular, the militia offers caravan guard services to traders. However, not all Powder Gangers in Dufresne's faction have taken the righteous path. One of them robbed the caravan he was guarding and fled to join the Finns. Dufresne's group is at war with Eddie's gang in the prison. Another escaped Powder Ganger, Oil Lamp Silva, organizes a gang where both Jackals and Vipers join. For both gangs, joining the conglomerate under the leadership of a man feared by everyone in the wasteland was a matter of survival. The leader of the Jackals, Eyetooth, sees Silva as a big alpha dog. The motives of the Vipers leader, Aspis, are unknown, as we won't be able to talk to him within the storyline. The Vipers and Jackals stop fighting each other and even jointly organize a slaughterhouse in a remote house in North Vegas. Remember, in the original New Vegas, there was the empty mole rat ranch, outside of which friendly rodents stood, which were killed by Rabbit Brahmin. So in this mod, the ranch is an active location managed by an old man named Richard, who has to hire mercenaries to protect the animals. His small rat farm is being constantly attacked by mad Brahmins, which are unleashed by a deranged ghoul, who considers himself the king of hoofed mammals. Our protagonist instead of the courier will be Ramirez, Refrain's right-hand man and the main quest giver of the mod. Ramirez grew up in Redding, where his brother was sheriff. In the vicinity of the town, there was some cult that absorbed new followers by semi-violent, semi-drug methods. The Redding police raided this cult, but they started shooting back. As a result of the shootout, all the cultists were killed. It was like the WoCG, but in Fallout. Ramirez was made the scapegoat for the massacre and sent to prison in the Mojave. Ramirez, by the way, was voiced by the modder Cellbox Psycho, the creator of Tales from New Reno series, several other mods, and one of the developers of Fallout Frontier. Moving on to the gameplay part of the mod, the events take place in the second half of October 2281, as some events are tied to the massacre in Ipton. Ramirez militia squad sets up a temporary camp at Gene Skydiving School. They observe the Eddie's prison, trying to lure prisoners into their crew. But it's not easy to do, as Eddie forcibly keeps the prisoners under his thumb. Nevertheless, they manage to recruit Medic Hannigan, the merchant Carter, who we meet in the original Vegas, and another new character, Krieger. Credit to the mod. Using original vanilla characters to continue their personal storylines is a damn immersive approach to mod creation, compared to creating entirely new characters. Moreover, the characters were revoiced, which requires additional effort. This adds much more depth to the whole story. Eddie learns about the leak of personnel from his gang and sends a squad to deal with Ramirez, but the militia repels them and leaves the camp, realizing they have nothing more to catch here. Ramirez himself goes to Mojave Outpost to contact the group of powder gangers who headed to Nipton. As we already know, one of the most important events in Mojave history is the massacre in Nipton, orchestrated by the Legion, which claimed the lives of both residents and Sarah troops and the mentioned group of powder gangers. This mod slightly changed the history and provides more details to this event, making it slightly more complex than it is in vanilla. Despite the lottery and the statement that everyone participating in it had equal chances of being crucified, beheaded or set free, even in the original New Vegas, only powder gangers hang from the crosses, while all the residents lie piled up in the town hall. Judging by the charred skeletons, it seems that they must have been NCR soldiers. If you forget about the lottery and accept that the Legion killed the soldiers and the residents and crucified the powder gangers, then with this mod taken into account, the following scenario emerges. The Legion wipes out the NCR soldiers in the hotel, but the field medic Christoph survives by pretending to be dead. After the Legion leaves, he, along with Ramirez/the courier and the crippled boxcars, rescues the crucified powder gangers and sets up an improvised hospital for them. But to their misfortune, the Jackals came to town trying to feast on the wounded. After all, meat shouldn't go to waste. The survivors managed to fend them off and send the wounded to the west side in the militia office. Meanwhile, the NCR storms the prison and takes out Eddie's powder gangers. The remnants of his gang, scattered in camps around the area, join Silva. Krieger, who left the NCR prison, founds an office in North Vegas. As part of the agreement with the city, which provided shelter, they provide medical services through Hannigan and set up a store through Carter, who among other things has contacts with the gun runners, through whom weapons are supplied to North Vegas. Dufresne Cruz takes on various jobs to raise caps. In particular, they are hired by Richard from Mole Rat Ranch to rid him of the nuisance. They also establish contact with the followers of the Apocalypse, helping them distribute medicine in North Vegas and treating its residents. Dufresne's crew persuades the powder gangers at the Whitaker and Hunter farms to leave Sam Cooke and join them. Sam Cooke was so busy sorting things out with Philip Leb that he simply forgot about his men. They are running out of food and Gekas are constantly trying to turn them into kebabs. As part of the initial agreement with the NCR, the militia takes out the death claws on Interstate 15, clearing the transportation artery. Of course, it may seem that powder gangers are too weak a group to hunt down a pack of the most terrifying creatures in the wasteland, but on the other hand, they are rectifying their own mistakes, and besides, the original game implied that the courier alone had to kill all the Deathclaws, which sounds even less plausible. By returning part of the previously stolen dynamite to Sloan, the militia apologizes and establishes trade with the settlement. Wanting to increase their dynamite arsenal, the militia explores several mines, including the Prospector's Den and the Searchlight Gold Mine, clearing out Jackals and Vipers in these locations respectively. After clearing out the den, the location is resettled by Prospectors. Krieger's crew in North Vegas investigates the disappearance of several residents and finds the house where the Vipers and Jackals have set up a slaughterhouse. Realizing that the Vipers and Jackals didn't just start sharing the dinner table for no reason, the militia mines the house. In subsequent negotiations with the NCR, the militia is forced to patrol the area around North Vegas and secure the road to Vegas from the south. To do this, they attack and destroy the northern, western, and eastern powder gangers' camps around the prison. Noticing that both Vipers and Jackals were in the camps, the militia learns that Oil Lamp Silva is subjugating gangs in the Mojave. The NCR doesn't want to spend its resources and manpower on a war with another raider gang. They have enough trouble with the Legion, Fiends, and Huns, especially since they have a group of criminals willing to receive amnesty, so they can put them to work with such missions. To get amnesty from the NCR, Dufresne's crew needs to deal with Silva, and before that, with the leaders of the Vipers and Jackals, Aspis and Eyetooth. They storm the Walking Box Caverns and Horowitz Farm. Silva's gang starts to fall apart at the seams, and to avoid losing control, he organizes a full-scale raid on West Side, which required the Powder Gangers militia, the West Side militia, and Thorne's guards to defend. This battle was legendary. Hordes of raiders descending from the hills like Vikings, crashing into the city's fortifications. Sticks of dynamite flew in both directions. Warriors picked them up and threw them back, hoping they wouldn't explode in their hands. Limbs and ragdolls flew for kilometers and got stuck in textures. But nevertheless, the epic climax battle was won by the city, and that's where the mod ends. I think one of the most interesting aspects of dissecting the lore of mods is discussing the epilogue. What is the outcome and what happened to the factions and settlements after the events of the game. There are two main concepts. The first is that the militia won the battle and dispersed due to heavy losses. Perhaps survivors like Dufresne and Ramirez will receive amnesty, or maybe not, and they will have to dissolve into the wasteland. The second concept is that the Powder Gangers militia as a faction survives, and after the NCR's victory at Hoover Dam, they received amnesty. But the question arises, will they dissolve into West Side, merge with the West Side militia, and what will happen after the war? Therefore, I would adopt the first concept, let the memory of them remain good in West Side. As for the Vipers and Jackals, this mod finally gives them a story of life and death, which I'm very pleased about. Well, I'm also pleased that West Side finally has its own plot, because in the original Vegas, absolutely nothing happens there. As for the Mole Rat Range, let it join the NCR after the battle for Hoover Dam. The second mod for today will be short in duration but excellent in content. Vault 121, Project Fellowship. As the name suggests, the mod introduces a new Vault-Tec vault into the Mojave Wasteland. At the moment, Vault 121 is unused, so why not, since most likely no one will ever use this number again. Of course, I don't like the density of the vaults in the Mojave region, but I like the lore associated with it. In the future, if Vault 121 is ever introduced by someone, the location can be changed while leaving the lore of this mod intact. Specifically, this mod was created by author Joshua Lowe in 2011, and is in the esteemed C tier in terms of the number of endorsements, with a decent conversion rate of 8.3. According to the mod's concept, Vault 121 is located in the rock under the Yangtze Memorial. Finally, this location has some meaning beyond being a beautiful background for Good Springs panorama. The vault was populated by very religious Christians, numbering 121 heads, and Bible readings were organized, with the text available on terminals. According to the experiment plan, after 5 years, all biblical texts were supposed to be erased, and after 100 years, new texts with a more fundamentalist incline were to be introduced. It was expected that over these 100 years, the vault dwellers without access to the original text would distort and transform the meanings of the sacred scriptures from generation to generation, and in the future, after becoming acquainted with the new versions of the stories, they would become obedient soldiers of the Lord, ready to go on a crusade against anyone at any moment. In my opinion, the experiment concept fits quite well into the Fallout style. In addition to the religious experiment, genetic experiments were also conducted in the vault. Some of all the text subjects were apparently given special additives, either with food or by some other means, which gradually increased their physical abilities so that in the end, they would not just be crusaders but illegitimate children of Captain America and Iron Man. The entire experiment was supposed to last 225 years, and the vault was to open in 2301. People were settled in the vault even before the war on December 7th of 2076. Immediately after that, the gear door was sealed, and all communication with the outside world was cut off. The dwellers didn't even know that the war had started 10 months later. In May 2078, the first results of the genetic experiment were recorded. The test subjects' strength and agility increased by 35%, but their mental stability decreased by 10%. On November 11th of 2082, according to the plan, all biblical texts were deleted from the terminals. By August 21st of 2103, the overseer Edgar Zimbardo managed to visit the surface using a secret door and confirmed for himself that there was nothing around except for scorched desert. Seeing no more sense in the original experiment, he wanted to introduce new versions of the Bible earlier than the planned century. At the same time, he began to edit the text so that it seemed that he himself was the Lord Savior and the incarnation of God, as well as his descendants. On January 7th of 2178, Edgar Zimbardo II reported that his faithful soldiers had become 67% better in physical abilities, but they were losing their personalities, becoming essentially drone. Problems with the reactor began. On October 14th of 2235, Edgar Zimbardo V reports that one of the two reactors has failed, and the second one is only operated at 71%. First reactor failed as a result of the meltdown of the active zone, and 50 people died in an attempt to repair it. A revolt began in the vault, but the faithful fanatical soldiers didn't let it develop. There is also an update on the results of the genetic experiment. The subjects became 10 times more agile, but they became feral and dangerous. They were eliminated. On January 1st of 2281, Edgar Zimbardo X reports that as a result of the gamma radiation experiment, 64% of the test subjects turned into ghouls and 36% died. Of the ghouls, 89% immediately became feral, and the remaining ones were forced euthanasia services. By the time the courier finds the vault, little remains of it. As a result of the shutdown of the second reactor, many doors in the vault were blocked, and ghouls took over most of the rooms. A small handful of people took refuge in the atrium. As a result of the subsequent explosion of the reactor caused by the courier meddling in the laboratory, the structural integrity of the vault was compromised. It partially collapsed, ghouls broke into the atrium and tore apart the survivors. The small cult of Zimbardo fell. The mod is small, so I won't be able to say much about it, but that's okay. It's a small addition to the overall history. Thank you for spending this time listening to another Lost Holotape. Don't forget to support the channel with your activity, it really helps the project. And that's all for today. Don't be afraid to admit your mistakes and correct them. Who knows, maybe you'll need amnesty from the NCR too. See you in the Wasteland, Wanderers. End of the holiday.